She made a mistake on Libya. She made a terrible mistake on Libya. And the next thing, I mean, not only did she make the mistake, but then they complicated the mistake by having no management once they bombed you know what out of Gaddafi. I mean, she made a terrible mistake on Libya, and part of it was the management after effect. I would be very, very cautious. I think I'd be a lot slower. She has a happy trigger. You look, she votes for the war.
But
she
have
goes
you
into
thought about
Libya.
personally the emotional burden of that
I
moment?
think it's a tremendous burden. I think there is no greater burden than anybody could have.
Let's go to Denver now and talk to former U.S. Ambassador to Iraq, now Dean of the International Studies Program at the University of Denver. One of our favorites, Ambassador Christopher Hill. Ambassador Hill, I would ask you how depressed you were by some of the comments from last night's forum, but I think we need to start with the depressing developments on this show earlier this morning, where you have a major party candidate who may draw enough votes away from one of the two candidates to actually shape the outcome of this election. Gary Johnson, when asked by Mike Barnicle what he thought about Aleppo, asked the question, what is Aleppo? What's your reaction to that?
I'm still trying to get my mind around that one. You know, in foreign affairs, there's a lot of inside baseball that I don't expect people to understand or follow. But the capital of ISIS, very much in the news, especially in the last 2 days, but for the last 2 years. And for him to draw that kind of blank, and by the way, boy, was that a blank stare in his face. I was wondering whether he was talking about something called an Aleppo, and was he confused by that? I couldn't figure it out. It was just mind-blowing. I don't know where he will have peaked in the polls, but I think he will now be known as Aleppo Johnson, and that may be the end of their bid.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of uncomfortable. I think the part of this that seems a little bit unfair is that the Republican nominee seems to make statements like similar to that. Even last night in the forum, when given more time.
You know, I thought the most bizarre thing Donald Trump said last night, and there's a lot of competition for the most bizarre thing that he said, but was when he talked about taking the oil. And I'm just kind of, I mean, that was a real, you know, chin scratcher. I mean, what did he mean by that? Are we going to surround the oil fields, pump it into big bladders, put it on ships? We're going to occupy those fields for the rest of history? What is he talking about? And again, with Donald Trump, you have no idea what he's talking about because he has no idea what he's talking about. So it's just another one of these things. And I was a little surprised that the moderator kind of let him off on that. I would have gone right at that issue and just forced him to kind of lay it out.
Well, speaking sort of as one who does that, I think what happens there in defense of Matt Lauer completely here is that Donald Trump says so many things that are like off the wall, exhibit a lack of knowledge, exhibit this sort of riffing that he leaves us with nowhere to go. And moving forward, he's going to have to be asked questions that are just about his basic knowledge, like his, you know, basic history, to reveal what it is that he doesn't know. But he throws so much against the wall, and when you only have a tight window, it's very, I wouldn't blame it on the moderator here. I would actually ask the viewers to really look at what Donald Trump is saying and to try and digest it, because most of it isn't true.
And
really.
For the record, Matt did follow up on that.
He did.
Said, how would you pull that off? And Donald Trump gave an answer that didn't quite make sense. Ambassador Hill, on another subject, you obviously were ambassador to Iraq 2009 and 2010. And in the years following, were critical of the Obama administration for the exit strategy. Is it your analysis now, Mr. Ambassador, that the early pullout from Iraq by the Obama administration gave rise to ISIS?
You know, I think it's a much more complicated situation. If you asked Iraqis, do they want American troops to remain in their country, many of them would say no. Or worse yet, they'd say yes to us, that they want them to remain, and then they'd say no to each other. So this was not just something coming out of Washington, although clearly the president wanted to fulfill a campaign promise. So the problem was getting the Iraqis to say, yes, we want U.S. troops there to maintain law and order. And then the second issue is the issue of ISIS forming out of disgruntled Sunni groups. And to understand Sunnis in Iraq, it's not just the Shia failure to reach out to them and offer them the deputy sports ministry position and then expect them to say, oh, okay, I'll stay out of this nihilistic organization called ISIS because I'm being offered a job. It's far more complex than that, and it goes really to the heart of the fact that in the Arab Middle East, 90% of the people there are Sunni, and Shia are a small minority, and yet Sunnis, who are a minority in Iraq, must live under Shia. So this is a serious, deep-seated problem that perhaps we should have given some thought to back in 2003.
Mr. Ambassador, what was your reaction to Secretary Clinton's statement last night? Pretty certain that we are never going to reintroduce troops to Iraq, never again, and Syria as well, never again.
Yeah, I never used the word never, and so I was a little surprised by that, but I think she's trying to make a point that we don't want to put in ground units, forces, conventional army again. And again, never is a word to be avoided in these circumstances. But I think she is trying to address people within the Democratic Party who really worry about this this idea that perhaps she will support going back in. U.S. ground troops are not the solution to what is essentially a civilizational problem crossing the Middle East between Shia and Sunni, between radical Sunni and not so radical Sunni, between the Arab Peninsula, that is Saudi Arabia, and the rest of the Arab world. These are very complex issues, and we should not be expecting U.S. troops to solve these issues. And I think perhaps she should have spent maybe a couple of seconds longer to explain that, but basically the right instinct.
Yeah. Ambassador Christopher Hill, thank you very much for being on the show this morning. Up next, Apple officially raises the curtain on its new iPhone. We'll talk about